Welcome to the Me and Read podcast. Here, we're exploring who we truly are in Jesus. We're learning how we can grow together for His glory and our good. I'm Reanna Hoffman, and I can't wait for us to discover what it means to live with intention, to grow in our faith, and to embrace who we were created to be. So turn up the volume, take a breath, and lean in as we jump in with both feet. Ready for the adventure? Let's go. Hey friends, welcome to this week's episode of the Me and Read podcast. I'm your host, Reanna Hoffman, and I am in person live with my friend Wes. Wes, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Wes. I am a lot of things, but maybe most importantly for this context is I'm dad. I have two kids. They're both almost middle school age. One is middle school age, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. I'm a husband to a previous guest, which is exciting. We have 3 dogs, so we're dog people. And we're originally from Mississippi and moved to Virginia to help start a church. And so I'm an associate pastor at a church and do a lot of other things.
Yeah, I jokingly, when I call him by his full name, I use all of his titles. So it's like Dr. Dean, Reverend, Mr. whatever. So you do really wear a lot of hats.
Wear a lot of hats.
You have lots of random jobs.
Yeah. Well, and we don't really have Renaissance people anymore, like those people that do all the things. But I feel like I just take them on and off depending on where we are.
Sometimes you have them on like 3 and 4 sideways.
That's very true. Depending on the moment and who I'm talking to.
That's true. With your middle schoolers, that you're.
So I jokingly tell people when they have children, because like when they have babies and they get to be like 2 or 3, like they're like, oh my goodness, everything's terrible, terrible 2s, ferocious 3s. I'm just like, listen, God gives you children when they're babies so that you learn to love them, so that when they drive you crazy later, you can rely on that love. And I think that this transition from child to teenager is not going to necessarily test that love, but there's going to be some definite stretching of how that love gets shown. That 5th grade to 6th grade switch, like there's just something about it. And it was like a literal switch. Like my son woke up one morning and it's like his brain had departed from his body, and he was now this just I don't know, person without a brain who is trying to function. And we're still working on getting the rest of it together.
I love your tweenager.
Oh my gosh.
But he is definitely in the tweenager phase.
Oh yeah. And so we have lots of conversations about personal responsibility and taking own our actions. We don't always get to blame things on others. And then we have a lot of conversations about it is okay to be angry. It is not okay to yell at people. So, all those things.
So, before we go on a tangent of your tweenager that I love, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self about navigating challenges or uncertainties in life?
Okay, so context, right? Context is the message. When I was 25 years old, I was, I think we were pregnant with our first son. Because, we were pregnant with our second, because I'm just doing math in my head, which is never my strong suit. So we would have been pregnant with our second, and then I had a full-time job. I think I was a classroom teacher at the time. And so my 25-year-old self, I think, is sometimes a little bit of a niche place to be, because a lot of modern 25-year-olds are probably still single, maybe still on a starter career or trying to figure things out for the first time. But no matter what, though, the thing is that when you're in your mid-20s, you are facing down a long line of uncertainties, and they always look different. And I think that that's one thing that, like, in your 20s, you really come to grasp, is that the life that you dreamed when you were 18, 19, 20, 21, when you were still in college, or when you just got out of high school and you said, this is the life I'm going to have. You hit your mid-20s and you're like, where's it at? Why isn't it here yet? And you kind of have to take a step back and realize that this dream that you may have, or this life that you may want, is a life that is built over a life. I can't tell you how many young 20s I meet and talk to, and they're like, why can't I have this now? And I'm like, because you're like 20 something. Like you have so much time. And I would say it wasn't even until I was 30 that I even grasped like what I wanted to do with my life, or how I wanted to, what career I wanted to land in, what I was actually interested in.
Yeah.
And so if I could go back and have coffee with my 25-year-old self, and he's like, Wes, I'm so uncertain about things, I would probably tell him that that's good. Because uncertainty, what uncertainty really does though is like it causes you to seek out answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we sometimes get stuck in the I don't know what to do and forget that the I don't know what to do's actually lead us to answers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those are good answers, sometimes they're not good answers. Sometimes you try things and you fail. But if we recast the idea that all of these events, circumstances, failures, all that's leading us to something better,
Yeah.
then it becomes not quite as stressful when it's not what you dreamed it was going to be.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me when I was in middle school, I had this Algebra 1 teacher, and I did not like being called up to the board to like display things, but her favorite way of fixing your problem was if you had a question about something that was on the test that you missed, you had to come to the board in front of all of your classmates and answer the question that you missed on your test, so you already didn't know how to work it. And we lived in rural Mississippi, so we lived next to a chicken plant. And for those that don't know, a chicken plant is like Sanderson Farms, where they get the chickens and they process the chickens and those kind of things.
There's an aroma.
There's a trail of feathers. It's a thing. And so she would say when we forgot specific things like negatives, she would say we got run over by the chicken truck. And so when we were answering these questions, she would be like, oh, so-and-so got run over by the chicken truck in front of everybody. So you knew that they had messed up, but by golly, the next time you didn't do it. So it's so funny to me that we learn the most from our mistakes and the things that we didn't expect, mainly because our brains like to hold on to those things and don't like to celebrate. But it is so true as a young adult in the mid-20s that like, oh, this is totally not what I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, and there's actually like a learning theory called failure-based learning. And like it's the whole idea is that you build a structured learning environment. Sorry, I'm an educator. I do education stuff. So you build a structured learning environment where you consistently increase the amount of rigor and the amount of stress that goes into the problem, but you are teaching people how to move past failure to grow forward. We don't actually, I don't think we talk about failure enough. And I think we don't do it for a lot of reasons, but I think there are two really important parts of failure. One, failure is important for me, right? It's important for me to know when I fail. And it's important for me to know how I failed and why I failed and how I can move past it, because that's where growth comes from. Yeah. Growth comes from that kind of reflection and introspection. But I think that failure is also for community. Because when we fail together, or when we fail within our community and it's visible, then that allows the community to actually, one, teach me what I messed up, or two, be there to help pick me up so that I can move forward. Yeah. I think about like, I have a weird relationship with most of my extended family, and this isn't the podcast for that. That's more for my therapist's office. But I think that's something that we miss a lot in what is now, I think, the American family, or the traditional American family, is that like slew of aunts and uncles and older cousins and grandma's best friend that we call Granny too, like all of that whole community, that village that, while this person may not be good at this, this other person is. And so if I wanted to know that, well, I just go call Uncle Bobby Sue and go do that. Yeah. And it removes that layer of frustration or that layer of stress that sometimes come with parental relationships, but also allows me to learn in a safe place. Yeah. I think one of the most important things as a mid-20s, though, is to recognize that you have a gift of community that is not just people like you. Like you need people who are older than you. You need people who are younger than you. And I personally think the best place to find that's the church, to build an intergenerational community within a church setting. I guess we all have the same vision, mission, and heart set towards the Lord. But it also allows us to figure out, here are people around me who have lived life in ways that I didn't, that I can learn from their mistakes. And if you show me a successful early 30s person, you show me someone who listened and learned from other people's mistakes.
Yes, that is so true. And I love that because we talk about community all the time, and we talk about how it's important as young adults to have community, but it's not just for the sense of not being isolated. It's for the knowledge and the building of each other up instead of, hi, yeah, it would be nice to not have to cook for myself by myself. It's more of a, hi, I don't know how to do this well.
Right.
Do you know somebody that knows how to do this well? And I cannot tell you the times that I've learned just by watching other people do life, whether it's from sitting at a kitchen table or babysitting kiddos or just listening to what they do. Because it's really funny where we live. There's a lot of career paths that I had no idea existed because they just didn't exist where I grew up. And so when I'm, especially like Philip, I'm like, you're a contractor, so you build houses? No, he does not build houses. And where I grew up, a contractor built houses. That's what they did. And so being in community and getting to ask those cultural questions, or like, hey, how do you adult? There's been many times that I've called your family and was like, hey, especially one of the times I remember was when it snowed and my first roommate and I lived together. And our breaker kept flipping and we couldn't figure out how to turn on the heat and we were cold. And so we FaceTimed Wes because we're like, hey, can you look at our breaker and tell us what's wrong? And so we had that community that we could be like, help.
Right.
Help and fix. And so I think that's important for young adults.
I think that the flip side of that is that we have this, the reason that failure is good for community is because my failures also help teach others.
Yes.
And so it's not just that I'm being picked up and I'm being taught myself, but I have other people who are watching my failures and they get to move forward with it. I mean, I feel that very keenly as a dad to almost teenagers because the veil of childhood is being pulled back more and more, and they get to see more and more of how me and my wife work and how a family works. And so like right now, the reason I talk about personal responsibility is we talk about the cognitive load of managing a house and like picking up after yourself and noticing that these things need to be done because this is part of you becoming an adult. And I refuse to let an 18-year-old leave my house that doesn't know how to keep house. Like, I just can't do it.
I love that. I love that.
Listen, I saw a video once of a group of college students around someone with like a manual can opener, and they were like mesmerized because they'd never seen it. And I said, listen, this can, my child, both of my children will know how to do their laundry, how to clean a kitchen, how to clean a bathroom, how to cook at least sustainable meals so that when they get to an apartment, they can do something more than ramen. Like, we will have skills that are necessary for life.
So you're raising your children to be the marrying kind?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I mean, that's my hope for them, is my goal for them, and my prayer for them. But we're gonna wait on that.
Oh yeah, you got another like 27 years.
But I don't know about. Anyway, my big hope though, and then this is true, is that when they leave, that they are able to sustain a life for themselves.
Yeah.
That they aren't calling me when they're at college to say, Dad, how do I do my laundry?
Yeah.
Like I had friends in college that did that. They took their laundry back home to their moms. Their moms washed their laundry on the weekends, folded it, put it back in, and no, like if you're going to be 18 and consider yourself an adult, buddy, be an adult.
Yeah, that's true. I have a question.
Yeah.
So what would you tell your younger self about finding purpose or staying true to your values?
Mm-hmm.
Other than how to do the laundry.
That's fair. So when I was 18 and I was a freshman in college, it was the first time that I was on my own. I grew up in an interesting family. I love my family, and I realize that they may watch this one as I get tagged in it, so I'm filtering a lot. But my parents got divorced when I was 16, and so that shifted a lot of things. It changed a lot of things. And so I built a lot of personal structures and a lot of personal identity around the things that I did for others, and kind of the different groups that I was a part of, and how I kind of built my life. But it wasn't until I got to college that I really had to wrestle with, who am I? Mm-hmm. What is my purpose? What am I doing with this life? Which is probably true for most 18-year-olds. Like, you get out of high school and you realize world's not high school. Let's figure this out again.
Hallelujah.
But I remember having a conversation with a girl that I was interested in, who in the future became my wife, who has a knack for speaking truth in love 98% of the time. Speaking truth, though, and cutting to the heart of things. That's one of the things I love about her. But I was on the phone and I was doing this whole angsty 18-year-old in the 2000s of, who am I? What am I supposed to do? What's my identity? What's my purpose? And she cut through all the mess that I was talking. And she said, it doesn't matter who you are. It matters whose you are. Who do you belong to?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if I would have caught that earlier and truly understood what it meant to have an identity that is found solely in Christ
Mm-hmm.
and solely in who he says that I am, then I could have skipped about 3 years of therapy and a couple of other things, and a lot of poor decisions.
Yeah.
Because when you're struggling to find purpose and when you're struggling to find identity, you try to put them on like hats or clothes. And so I'm going to try this identity today. I'm going to try that identity today. And you're trying to find the one that fits. The problem is that you're still trying to push yourself into different places than who you actually are.
Yeah.
And so when you strip away all of that mess, like, and you're lying in your bed, it's 2 a.m. because you can't sleep, and you're rolling around this question of who am I? What's my purpose? What I would tell my younger self is stop focusing on you. Because when you focus on yourself and you're focusing on all of these things that are rolling around your head, it's really just a flipped form of pride. Like,
Yeah.
you're so self-focused that you can't see what's going on. And so it requires us to take the step back and think through, and there's value in thinking through, like, what am I interested in? What are my values? What do I consider important? Like, all that's important. But at the end of the day, if we are in Christ,
Mm-hmm.
we are told that we put him on.
Yeah.
We put on the new self that he's made. And so we need to spend more time articulating and discovering what he says about us in his word and who he calls us to be and who he
Yeah.
calls us and how he names us, as opposed to us trying to figure it out for ourselves.
Yeah.
I really, though, like, if I could talk to my younger self, it would be a lot of that conversation of really instilling some biblical truth around who the Bible says that I was and am. Because when you recognize that when we accept Christ, that he extends to us his righteousness and he extends to us his identity. We're called a co-heir with
Mm-hmm.
him. Like, when you grasp those things, like, all the rest of this stuff kind of fades away. It
Yeah.
pales. Because our identity is not found in who we're dating. Our identity is not found in who we marry. It's not found in our job or salary or what neighborhood we live in, what schools our kid goes to, or
Yeah.
what sports our kids do. Lord, help me not get started on that one. Like, it's not found in any of those things. Our identity is found in who we belong to.
Yeah.
And if we don't belong to Christ and we try to belong to ourselves, we are poor masters.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any action steps that you would tell your younger self?
Yeah. So um action steps, meaning, like, here's how you get to this. Here's how
Yeah.
you figure this out. Um Now I'm trying to remember what books were not written. But I think the fact of the matter, though, is, like, as much as we want to go read a book or go listen to a podcast or join the right church or listen to the right sermon or like the right worship band or whatever, in terms of Christian community and Christian culture, like, as much as we want to do that, that's not the answer. I would say the two things that would get me there as an action step would be, one, actually read the Bible.
Yeah.
Step one, actually know what it says, and study it to know what it says, not for knowledge's sake to
Yeah.
argue with the other guys in the dorm room, but to actually know what it says, and how it applies. And two, find an older man or an older person, in my case, a man who has walked with Christ, who could speak that truth into me.
Yeah.
My first summer between our freshman and junior year, I got to be a summer missionary to California. And it was honestly a life-changing experience for me, because it was the first time that I experienced older people who wanted to disciple me and who wanted to show me what it meant to follow Jesus. And when they asked me a deep theological question, it wasn't for me to show off.
Yeah.
It was prove it. Book, chapter, verse.
Ooh.
Where do you stand on this?
Uh-huh.
Because they recognized that it was those kinds of stretching moments that were often painful and were not comfortable, but those stretching moments that were going to actually allow me to build that identity that's firmly fixed in Christ. as opposed to the youth group Wesley that thought he had it fixed in Christ and was a really good Bible thumper. But when it came to actually recognizing how the knowledge of Jesus affected the heart of Wesley, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I needed other people who could speak that into me.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we don't have those other people, we can't they're not able to mirror our actions, our attitudes, our words to us. One of the funniest parts about being married for me is Philip is one of those people that was just going to tell you the truth, kind of like your spouse. And so he will very point blank be like, "Hi, why are you doing this?" And he notices things that I didn't notice about myself, A, because I couldn't see them. But he also gets to have specific time with me that other people have never gotten to have. And I get to be like my complete self, which is so fun when you just get like undiagnosed ADHD when you're in your 20s. But so he gets to see those things and mirror those things to me, which is why we need people that are willing to disciple us and mentor us and are willing to hold us accountable, because they get to be like, "Hey, friend, so you're doing this thing. Do you know you're doing this thing?"
Yeah. But the thing is the only way that works is when we're truly vulnerable with that person. Because there are lots of people that are in quote unquote discipleship relationships that look like showing up, reading a chapter of the Bible. How can I pray for you? Here's the, my grandma's sick kind of thing. And they never actually invest in the personal, this is what's happening in me. Like, this is how I'm struggling. Here's the sins I need to confess. Like, that's the vulnerability that we're called to in discipleship that actually leads to life change. Yeah. And so, like, thinking through purpose, thinking through value, thinking through identity, you have to be vulnerable enough with yourself and with someone you trust who's going to be a safe place for you, but who's going to hold you to it. You have to be vulnerable enough to be honest. Yeah. Because if you're not honest, you're going to build a fake life, and you're going to show up in your mid-30s or your mid-40s or your mid-50s and look back, and you're going to say, "What was this? Like, this wasn't real." I'm at the stage of life right now where but I have friends that I saw get married, I saw have kids, and now I'm watching get divorces. And it's because they turn over and they wake up and they're like, "Wait, this wasn't the life I thought it was. This wasn't the person I thought they were. We said yes way too quick. We did X, we did Y, we did Z." All of that's there. But if they would have hopefully had someone who was older than them, who they could listen to, that they could be honest, that they could be vulnerable with, who could start poking holes in things and start asking really good questions because they were honest. Yeah. Then it would go a lot better. Though that's also true, and as a parent, this is something that I have to remind myself of, is that I can't save my kids from their own testimony. Yeah. They have to be able to live their life and make their own choices. So at the end of the day, like, you can have the best disciple maker as your discipler. You can read the Bible, you can memorize it back to front, you can go to the right church and sing the right songs and do all the things, and still find yourself 10 years from now completely lost. Yeah. Because you missed it. Yeah. That's heavy and good. Because you make a good point, because if you just answer all the questions correctly, because I was definitely a yes woman and knew all the answers and could quote the things, but if it took me a long time to realize that I didn't even know myself. Like, the first couple months of college, somebody asked me what my favorite snack was. I had no idea. And you're like, "Reanna, how do you not know what your favorite snack was?" Well, Reanna's a triplet. And so the boys got to pick what we ate, which was fine, and I was chill. But I liked cinnamon sugar Pop-Tarts because that was the last thing left in the box. Not because it's my favorite. I have since learned that I like the chocolate Pop-Tarts when I could eat them. Gluten-free life at the moment. But it's funny when you don't realize you don't know yourself. Yeah. And then you have to have a date with yourself for a very long time to figure out what you like. And then you have to figure out what vulnerability actually looks like, because you had this facade that you thought you were being vulnerable, and you just didn't know yourself enough to know that you weren't. Yeah. Honestly, I think that's one of the gifts of singleness. Yeah. And that gift of, like, not getting married immediately. I say that as a person who got married the week after they graduated college. But that brought a unique perspective, because now I'm having to figure myself out as an adult with another person that I'm attached to for life. Now, praise God, we will be married 16 years in May. And so, like, we worked it out. It's good. But year 2, year 3, when we, give marriage counseling and talk to new couples, and they start saying, "Hey, we're having these issues." And I'm like, "You're probably a year in, aren't you? Year and a half?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah." This is where all that honeymoon stuff of we're just going to be awesome best friends starts to fade, and you realize you live together.
Yeah.
And all of the hidden, buried junk that you hid from each other gets to come out. And so now you get to work through that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can remember it was a very pivotal moment. I can tell you can't tell you the date, but I can tell you the time of year. I can tell you the place. I can walk you to the apartment room that this happened, where Britta and I had a very intense conversation. We never called them arguments. They were conversations. A very intense conversation that really was the moment that we had to draw a line in the sand that said, no, we are committed to each other and we're going to work this out, even if it requires us to have to die to ourselves, because who does that? That was sarcasm, by the way.
That was biblical.
We die to ourselves and figure out what it means to actually love each other as we're called to, and what it means to put ourselves there.
Yeah.
By the way, unfrosted strawberry Pop-Tarts, best ones.
That's going to be our poll for the week. Pop-Tarts, which one's the best? Unfrosted? How are we friends? We're going to have to talk about this later. Next question.
Okay.
What's one piece of wisdom or lesson that you've learned that you think every 25-year-old should know or hear? Hey friends, sorry to interrupt our really cool conversation with Wes, but there was this thing that I needed to tell you about. So have you heard about March Madness, the basketball thing? You know how much I know about it because I just called it a thing. So a friend and I are putting together a group called March Madness, but it's actually March Gladness. You know, the junk drawer where the soup ladle plays, it's a gatekeeper, or the linen closet that turns into an avalanche every time you open the door. Yeah, those little chaos zones. They may have won a few rounds, but guess what? We're bringing our A game. Over the next 3 weeks, we're turning frustrations into victories, one small challenge at a time. We take care of those pesky spaces with fun, motivation, and a game plan that works. In our Facebook group that we're hosting, you'll get encouragement, ideas, and the best part is you won't be alone. So join our Facebook group, March Madness to Gladness. The link is in our show notes. You're going to have weekly huddles with myself and my friend Jen. You're going to meet your teammates, you'll get some assists, and we're going to celebrate every single win. Whether it's a one-pointer or a total transformation, winning the whole game, every play counts. This event is from March 16th to April 7th, so let's clean up, clear out, and make life a slam dunk. I hope you guys can join us, and I cannot wait to keep going. So don't forget to scroll down and connect to our Facebook group. Otherwise, we're going to jump back in our conversation with Wes. What's one piece of wisdom or lesson that you've learned that you think every 25-year-old should know or hear?
There are lots of little nuggets.
We'll take any and all.
I think about like the penguins that bring each other pebbles as signs to show them love. Like wisdom's a little bit like that. They're little pebbles. They're little nuggets. I think that one of the things that I've learned that I love is that in every stage of life that I've in, I learned something different about God and His love for us and His love for me. I learned something different as a teenager, as a young adult, as a early 20s, as a single, as a married man, as a father. Like I learned some new facet of that. And so if I could give myself or give anyone some nuggets of wisdom, I would say that lean into the fact that you're in the season that you're in for a reason. It may not be fun. It may be hard. It may honestly suck, if I can say that.
Yeah, you can.
It may be really difficult, but lean into the season that you're in because you're in that season for a reason. And it's meant to build in you an identity and a character and a person that's more like Christ.
Yeah.
I would add on to that, though, that you can't allow your emotions to rule your decisions. One of the funniest moments that I have, and this is why I loved when we were younger parents and our kids were younger and we were surrounded by college students, because we got to just parent in front of them. And a lot of times the things I'm telling my kids, I could tell the college student that was sitting on my couch. But it was with a particular college student, and we were with Emmeline, my daughter, who I just named her, sorry. who was legit like throwing a 2-year-old tantrum. Like, and if you've never been around my daughter when she throws a
I
tantrum,
love her.
it is a sight to behold.
It is.
And it is a roller coaster ride. Where 8 years later we're still doing it, but we survived. We press on. But she was in the middle of throwing this huge fit, and it was in a position where I could not stop. Like we're like trying to cross the street kind of situation, right? Like there is no stopping to gentle parent here. It's like we got to move. And I legit looked at her and I said, "You can be sad, you can be frustrated, you can cry, but you got to keep walking. Let's go." And this college student stopped and looked at me and she said, "Can you say that again?" I said, "You can cry, but you have to keep walking." And she like grabbed her phone and wrote that down. And she's like, "I have to remember that. That's like life changing." And I'm like, why is this life changing? But it's because I'm gonna soapbox,
That's
and you
okay.
can cut this if you need to later. We allow emotions to dictate our feelings because we have zero emotional intelligence. And we think that our emotions are actually truths because if I feel it, that means that it is something that is true. And that's not correct. If you feel it, it's real. The question is, I'm feeling this. It's a real feeling. I can't deny that I'm actually feeling this, but is it true? And what percentage of truth is it? So if you are, it's 2 a.m. and you're feeling terrible at your apartment by yourself and everything's falling apart around you and everybody hates you and that is the feelings that you're in, ask yourself, I feel this. Is it true? And if it's not true, then you start combating your feelings with truth. That's why the Bible tells us to take our hearts, that they are deceitful above all else, because our hearts and our feelings and the seat of who we are will try to deceive us because its desire is not the Lord. Its desire is what is comfortable, and its desire is what makes us happy or what makes us feel whatever we want to feel in that moment. The seat of my heart always wants cheese fries. Like, that's true. I cannot have cheese fries every day. I can't. I will have an early death, and that would be a very sad thing for my kids. So it's a very important thing that we take our feelings and we check them against truth. So if I feel that I am this person in this identity, okay, that's a real feeling. Is it true? And if it is true, what percentage is it true? Is it 50% true? Like, do I just feel this some of the time? Is it 75? Is it 100? And if it's 100% true and I don't want to feel that way, now I know this is what I have to start working on and figuring out. I think that we all need to spend a little bit more time reconciling our thoughts, our hearts, our souls, our bodies, because we are one holistic person. Your mind, your soul, your heart, your body, it's one. And when we get one out of whack, then everything else falls apart. So if your mental health is struggling, if your mental health is struggling, then your emotional health, your spiritual health, your physical health will follow. If your physical health is struggling, same thing. But what we forget is that if your spiritual health is struggling, all those other things fall apart too. So if you are struggling to connect with the Lord, to connect with community in Him, and to be present in the Lord, and you're like, why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Why am I hungry all the time? Why can I not make headway in this life? Let's check our souls first, because we're holistic in our approaches.
Did you just give my listeners homework?
Maybe.
That's one of the jokes because Wes always gives me homework even when I don't want homework, because he loves me and calls me on my stuff and gives me homework. Is there anything else that you want to share with our pupils?
As a mid-20, I would say enjoy the time that you have. And we try to rush through it so fast. We want to be further in our careers. We want the house. We want the dream life, right? But like, enjoy what you have in this moment. Because as an early 20, a mid 20, a late 20, you're in a season where you don't get to come back.
It's true.
And the things that you do now, the habits that you build, the liturgies that you put into your life now will determine the person that you become 10 years from now. So if you have a dream of who you want to be, you start by building that now, one habit at a time.
Yeah.
So lean in.
That's so good. Okay, friends. Well, you have had your minutes with Wes. Wes will be back because I love listening to Wes. But if you love listening to Wes, or if you have questions for Wes, if you will look in our show notes, I'm going to link you to not only my social media, but Wes's social media. If you have a comment that you're like, hey, I really don't want to put it under the show in Spotify or Apple Podcast or YouTube, if you will DM me, my Instagram is at Reanna, Reanna.ivy.hoff, Hoff, and I will either direct that information to Wes or to myself and would be more than happy to have a conversation with you. I'm for real about the poll being the frosted versus unfrosted Pop-Tarts. I need to know. Okay? I need to know. And did you know that you can share this podcast with your people via text message or social media? You can't do it via carrier pigeon because I don't know if the carrier pigeon is going to carry your phone. But you can follow, you can subscribe, and that helps us reach other people with the good news of Jesus. So, cannot wait to see you next week. Please vote in our poll. I need to win. So I need you to vote for Frosted Pop-Tarts, not unfrosted Pop-Tarts, Wes.
It's too sweet.
Too sweet.
Frosted or too sweet.
What? Anyway, cannot wait to see you later, and bye, friends. That's it for today's episode of Meet and Greet. I hope this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, and reminded you that you are seen, valued, and loved. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review. It helps more women like us step into who we were created to be. Keep leaning in, keep growing, and keep walking with Jesus. Until next time, bye, friend!